Let me ask you a profoundly uncomfortable question right out of the gate. Why does the arrival of the ultimate Prince of Peace require the immediate and gruesome slaughter of toddlers?
Right. It's a brutal image.
It really is. According to the dark fantasy narrative we're dissecting today, innocent boys, quote, not but 2 years old, are ripped from their mother's breasts.
And fed to beasts.
Just because heaven decided it was time to announce its king.
Exactly. So it forces us to ask this incredibly dark question. Is human collateral damage just, the accepted cost of doing divine business?
And it really seems like it is.
Well, I argue absolutely not. Because when pure, unadulterated light enters a world entirely governed by corrupt, deeply entrenched power, the darkness doesn't just politely step aside. It violently retaliates.
But come on, you're entirely excusing the mechanics of the tragedy by calling it retaliation.
How is it excusing it? The slaughter isn't God's design. It is the grotesque anatomy of human tyranny reacting to a cosmic threat.
No, see, I argue this text exposes a terrifying cosmic indifference to human life. When you examine the actual narrative architecture, you find this grim reality where divine intervention acts as a literal lightning rod for unspeakable violence.
A lightning rod, okay, but
It leaves us with an unresolved tension, right? About the immense bloody cost of salvation. Humanity isn't being saved in this narrative. We are being used as a proxy battleground.
wait, let's look at the actual evidence in the text before we jump to that. You're saying proximity to the divine essentially guarantees trauma.
It absolutely does.
But you're ignoring the source of that trauma.
The source is the provocation from heaven. The text is unambiguous about this paradox. King Herod learns of the prophecy and immediately orders his men to cut the roots before they grow.
Because he's a paranoid tyrant.
Sure, but look at the result. Mothers in Bethlehem are haunted by the ghosts of their slaughtered sons. And the text gives us that chilling admission from Herod's own commander.
Right, the general.
Yeah, the man who actually wields the blade. He says, I took futures from mother's arms, snatched whole lifetimes before they even learned their own names.
It's a devastating line.
It is. Think about the psychological destruction of the man following those orders, let alone the actual victims. And where is heaven during this massacre?
Well, heaven is protecting the child who will ultimately break the cycle of violence
It protects one child.
to save everyone else.
By actively guiding the chosen one to safety in Egypt via a literal star, right? An angelic dream warning, so heaven clearly has the power to intervene.
Yes, they alter astronomy to provide an escape route.
Exactly. But it actively chooses to leave the ordinary children of Bethlehem to face Herod's sorcerer general, his demonic beasts, and his soldiers.
I mean,
That is a horrifying moral calculus. The framing of this narrative makes humanity the tragic, forgotten victims. We are just caught in the crossfire of an ancient dispute between God and Lucifer, forced to bleed for a war we didn't start.
You're isolating one tragic consequence and completely ignoring the internal psychology of the tyranny that the text goes out of its way to show us.
I'm looking at the bodies on the ground.
You're acting as if heaven swung the sword. The narrative explicitly places the blame for these horrors on human free will and demonic rebellion, not divine orchestration.
But heaven knew what Herod would do.
Let's look at the mechanics of Herod's power. Listen to his own philosophy of rule. He literally says mercy makes men easy to replace. I raise it to loyalty, to power, and to the future that belongs only to those ruthless enough to take it.
Right, but Herod only unleashes that ruthlessness because heaven deliberately kicks the hornet's nest.
He was already a monster.
But he was content ruling until a cosmic event threatened his throne.
He was a tyrant ruling through terror. The blood on the streets of Bethlehem is the direct result of a human king desperately clutching his earthly crown because he knows he has no divine right to rule.
So heaven proves him right by inciting a massacre.
God's intervention in this text is entirely subversive to that exact kind of power. Look, God doesn't arrive the way King Solomon did in this universe's lore.
Well, no, Solomon was a conqueror.
Exactly. According to the lore, Solomon wore a forge with heaven's will and forced darkness to kneel. God could have done that here. He could have arrived as a fully armored conqueror and evaporated Herod on the spot.
And spare the toddlers, yes! Why didn't he?
Because if God descended with an army of angels to physically crush Herod, he would just be replacing one form of violent coercion with an omnipotent one.
I think the mothers of Bethlehem would have preferred the omnipotent coercion.
Overriding free will with overwhelming force is just another form of tyranny. Instead, God arrives as a vulnerable seed. The text beautifully describes this arrival as a quiet place between breath and creation, where the soil is inside a woman.
A very poetic way to describe a very bloody situation.
The divine strategy is to dismantle the very concept of tyrannical power by sharing in the vulnerability of the victims, by absorbing the world's darkness rather than mirroring it.
Let's examine the scale of this war, though, because I just don't buy that humanity is anything more than collateral in a cosmic family feud.
A family feud?
Yes, we are talking about massive, terrifying, angelic warfare described in the text. You have Michael and Gabriel physically fighting Lucifer in the skies. The heavens are literally tearing open.
It's an epic conflict, absolutely.
And what is Lucifer's actual grievance? Why does he hate humanity so much?
Well, he rebelled against the divine order.
He rebelled because of a metaphysical sibling rivalry. He admits to Michael, "I was made for more than worship. I stood in glory. I burned brighter than all of them. And still, he looked past me."
Right. His pride was wounded.
Lucifer rebels out of wounded pride because he felt unvalued by the Father. He wanted the spotlight. And who pays the price for this cosmic temper tantrum? We do.
Humanity isn't the collateral. Humanity is the prize.
We are the proxy. Look at how Lucifer operates. He explicitly states his strategy for ruining humanity isn't just physical chains.
No, it's much deeper than that.
He doesn't need to possess armies if he can control the mind. He says, "I learn the wound, then I whisper to it."
Which is a brilliant, terrifying depiction of temptation.
It's total psychological warfare. He targets human trauma to keep us, quote, scrolling, chasing, performing, comparing.
Which sounds incredibly modern, right?
Very. He feeds what is broken to keep our souls tired. He creates an entire system of exhaustion. And why? Just to spite heaven. We are just the playground where an angel who didn't get enough attention takes out his rage.
You are entirely stripping humanity of its agency within the narrative.
I'm reading the text.
Yes, Lucifer uses psychological warfare. Yes, he weaponizes our trauma and our insecurities. But the text provides a magnificent counterexample to your claim that humans are just pawns who are helpless against this whispering.
Who? John the Baptist?
Yes. Look at the character of John the Baptist.
The desert prophet who eats locusts and ends up living in the dirt? That's your example of agency?
The mortal man who fully understands the cosmic and political stakes and chooses to act anyway. He doesn't just preach in the wilderness. He actively confronts Herod about his unlawful marriage.
Which was a suicide mission.
But he does it. He publicly humiliates a paranoid tyrant. John knows exactly what the risks are. True power in this narrative's cosmology is found in John's unwavering agency.
Okay, but
He isn't mind-controlled by Lucifer's whispers, and he isn't treated as a puppet by God.
and what does that agency actually get him?
It gets him true freedom.
True freedom.
Yes. When he is facing execution, when he is literally staring down cold steel, what does he say? "I made my peace with God a long time ago. Now salvation awaits me."
Right.
He chooses truth over comfort. John's bravery, his absolute refusal to bend to the psychological warfare you just described, shatters the idea that humans are just tragic victims trapped in an angelic crossfire. He takes a stand.
John's bravery is unquestionable, but let's look at the result of that stand. His head ends up on a silver plate to satisfy a dancing girl's request.
Which highlights the depravity of Herod's court, not God's plan.
Which brings me to the profound cognitive dissonance and psychological cruelty of the divine plan, even for those who are explicitly chosen.
I wouldn't call it cruelty. I would call it the immense weight of purpose.
Well, let's look at Joseph. If there was ever a character who embodies the agonizing burden of divine proximity, it is him.
He's a fascinating figure.
He is plagued by massive cognitive dissonance. His brain literally cannot process the paradox of his reality. Early on, he states flatly, "I don't have time for riddles. That baby is not mine."
Because he's a pragmatist.
He is an ordinary carpenter. He works with wood and nails. He deals in tangible, physical realities, and suddenly his fiancée claims to be carrying the architect of the universe.
It's a lot to take in.
And what is his reward for stepping up to this impossible task? He is forced into literal physical combat with a dark entity in the woods.
The scene in the forest is incredible.
He yells at the demon, "There's something wicked in you. I can feel it." He is dragged to the edge of his sanity and his physical limits, fighting off beasts in the dark just to protect a child that heaven arbitrarily decided to place in his lap.
It wasn't arbitrary.
I frame this as a profoundly unfair burden. He admits to a stranger that waking up every day trying to raise the chosen king is, quote, waking up every day praying I don't fail what God trusted me with.
Yeah.
The text reveals a terrifying truth here. Heaven's trust is a crushing weight.
You're looking at Joseph's trauma and seeing a curse. But the text explicitly frames this heavy burden as an elevation of his character.
An elevation through torment.
The narrative doesn't hide the danger. A character explicitly tells Joseph that purpose brings danger. But look at why Joseph is chosen. He isn't a warrior. He isn't a king.
Exactly my point.
If heaven wanted to protect the child with physical force, they would have given him to a Spartan.
But they gave him to a carpenter who has to fight demons barehanded. That's my point. It's absurd.
It's not absurd. It's deeply intentional. Because the text states that a father's steady, faithful love is the kind of strength heaven chooses first. Let me give you an analogy to explain how this works. Joseph's role in this universe is like a mortal entrusted to carry the burning core of a star in his bare hands.
Okay.
Is it dangerous? Yes, catastrophically so. Does it threaten to consume him? Absolutely. But it is the ultimate act of divine trust. And you are ignoring how the narrative shows this burden actually refining him.
Forged by trauma is still trauma. It doesn't make the burning core of the star any less destructive to the hands that hold it.
But it's not arbitrary trauma that destroys him, it builds him. Later, when he is teaching the young Jesus to fish, Joseph explains that hunger teaches the hands to be calm and the heart to listen.
A nice sentiment, but
He has taken the terrifying cosmic weight he was handed and transmuted it into profound human wisdom. He wasn't crushed by the burden. He was forged by it into the exact father the Son of God needed to understand the vulnerability of the human condition.
well, if heaven's trust is a crushing weight for the Father, look at what it does to the Son when he finally hits the wilderness.
The temptation.
Right. Because this is where the narrative's core thematic tension truly peaks. The temptation between Jesus and Lucifer in the woods. Lucifer delivers a chillingly accurate critique of humanity.
He delivers a cynical manipulation masked as truth.
But it is truth! He tells Jesus, people do not want truth. Truth asks too much. They want something softer, something beautiful, something they can hold without having to bow.
It's a dark view of us.
That is an uncomfortably accurate read on human nature. Look around. And what is Lucifer actually offering here? A bloodless coup.
A trap.
He tells Jesus he can have the kingdom. He can be the King of Kings. He can have it all without the cross, without the suffering. He says, join me and I will give you a kingdom no man can take.
And Jesus rejects it because it's a lie.
But we have to ask the forbidden question raised by this exchange.
Which is?
Wouldn't accepting Lucifer's deal have spared humanity centuries of bloodshed? Think about the implications. If Lucifer is willing to hand over the keys to the kingdom without a war, why does Jesus choose the path that guarantees his own gruesome death and the martyrdom of his followers?
Is the divine refusal to compromise actually what perpetuates the violence?
Wait, let me make sure I'm tracking your argument here. You were suggesting that aligning with the architect of human misery, the entity who explicitly uses chains on the mind to keep souls tired, is a better path for humanity just because it avoids physical war?
I'm saying that text forces us to look at the collateral damage and ask if a bloodless victory under a tyrant is better than a bloody war for a truth that people might not even want.
That is the ultimate temptation, the allure of the benevolent dictator, the idea that we can just surrender our agency for comfort. It's compelling, but the text aggressively rejects this premise, and the climax of their exchange explains exactly why it's a trap. Jesus recognizes that a kingdom built on Lucifer's terms is just another prison. Even if it's peaceful, it's exactly what Lucifer described earlier, keeping souls compliant by feeding what is broken. A kingdom where people are ruled by their appetites, sedated by pleasure, and spared the hard demands of truth isn't salvation, it's a zoo.
But the animals in the zoo are safe.
Safe but entirely unfree. Jesus proves that true power isn't Herod's gold, it isn't Roman steel, and it isn't Lucifer's mind control. True power is the absolute refusal to turn stones into bread to satisfy an immediate hunger.
Why is turning stones to bread a trap? He's literally starving after 40 days. It's the most rational thing he could do.
Because if he uses divine magic to bypass his own human suffering, he reduces human existence to mere consumption.
Oh, come on.
If Jesus solves hunger with magic, he becomes a dictator of dependency, not a liberator of souls. He becomes the very thing Lucifer wants him to be, a provider of bread and circuses.
Well,
The voice from heaven later commends Jesus for exactly this, saying he chose obedience over impulse, spirit over flesh. To accept Lucifer's deal would mean overriding human freedom.
how so?
It would mean treating humanity exactly the way Lucifer does, as cattle to be managed rather than children to be raised. Jesus chooses the path of suffering because bypassing it would mean abandoning humanity to the illusion of freedom while they remain in chains.
A cage is a cage, but at least in Lucifer's cage, children aren't ripped from their mother's breasts by Herod's soldiers.
That's a heavy way to look at it.
Which brings us to the ultimate reckoning of this dark fantasy text. When you strip away the majestic theological language, the source material unearths a grim reality.
Go on.
Divine intervention in this universe acts as a catastrophic lightning rod. Yes, God arrives as a vulnerable child, but that vulnerability triggers unspeakable violence from entrenched human power, violence that heaven does not stop.
Because they won't force compliance.
We are left with a profoundly unresolved tension about the immense, bloody cost of salvation. The text forces us to look at the ghosts haunting Herod, the mothers weeping in Bethlehem, and ask if the war between Michael and Lucifer was worth the collateral damage of human sanity and human lives.
And I maintain that the text is a brilliant, uncompromising subversion of traditional power dynamics. It shows us a God who refuses to conquer by force, because a kingdom won by coercion is just a different flavor of Herod's tyranny.
Even if it saves lives in the short term.
Exactly. Instead, the divine chooses to intimately absorb the world's darkness. By stepping into the crosshairs of human free will and demonic malice, the King of Kings defeats evil through vulnerable presence and unyielding truth. The suffering isn't caused by God. It is the immense, agonizing friction of pure light entering a world addicted to shadows.
On this, at least, our perspectives converge. This narrative utterly shatters any sanitized, safe version of the Nativity story.
It really does.
It replaces the quiet stable with a psychologically intense, cosmically terrifying reality where heaven and hell violently collide on earth, and the shockwaves tear through the lives of ordinary carpenters, innocent children, and desert prophets.
We certainly remain in tension over whether this cosmic theater justifies the profound human suffering it triggers. But, contemplating these metaphysical paradoxes is essential to understanding the true weight of the text.
Absolutely.
It asks us to confront the disturbing image of a world where ordinary humans must navigate the violent fallout of a war between angels and demons. The arrival of the Prince of Peace was paid for in the blood of Bethlehem's toddlers. The ultimate question the text leaves us to grapple with is whether the light of that star was worth the darkness it exposed.